Guys, I hate to be the one that has to remind you, but it looks like summer's coming to an end. Now, this particular past summer that's now coming to a close is kind of an interesting one for me because I just graduated from college, as some of you guys know. So this past summer season was the first ever for me that was not synonymous with freedom and no homework. It is now basically like every other season, just going to work all the same, except a little bit hotter. But on a little bit of a brighter note, this past summer I got a lot of amazing manga reading done as I've been working on my 2023 goal of reading every single volume in my manga collection. So far, so good. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a summer manga reading log. I love doing these kinds of videos. I know some of you guys like watching, hearing my thoughts on what I've been reading recently. So today, we're doing just that. Now, typically these manga reading log style videos don't get as many likes or views, which obviously isn't what it's about. But if you are a fan of these kinds of videos and want to see more, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more manga videos like this in the future. So without any further ado, I say we go ahead and get right into what I've been reading this past summer 2023. Alright, so to start off this video, I have a horror manga that I read this past month that I recently showed off in my most recent manga haul. And like I said in that video, this is a series that I've been looking for years, basically since I started buying out-of-print manga. That is Mail Volumes 1 through 3. Now this first volume right here, I'm just gonna come out and say it, this is one of the funniest first chapters of manga I have ever read. Just the comedy is so spot on with what I personally think is funny, and the horror aspect is really well done to boot. But as you continue on in this volume and the other two with these short horror stories, it gets pretty formulaic, a lot of the same. Of course, there's still some cool imagery, but after that first amazing chapter, there was nothing really in this that blew me away or had me glued to the book wanting to know what was going to happen next. So I enjoyed this one, but in the grand scheme of things, it was alright. Moving on to another complete manga series that I read this month. This one I enjoyed quite a bit more. I had a blast reading this one, and that is going to be Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer. Now, here in my hands I have the final volume 9 and 10 omnibus. This whole series was recently reprinted by 7 Seas, so I had the chance to get my hands on a copy for super cheap. And boy oh boy is this manga unique. Now, I would classify this as sort of a battle shonen. There's lots of action, you know, some shonen tropes, but it's also unlike anything I have ever read before. If I had to make any comparison at all, I would probably compare it most closely to Bokurano no Hours, as our cast of protagonists in the manga basically get all these powers without really asking for them and have the fate of the world basically tossed in their lap. And though there are some sad and touching moments here and there is a lot of comedy that I really enjoyed. A very unique cast of characters, all have their own quirks and personalities, just a very unique and enjoyable manga all around. I would highly recommend. I believe the reprints are still in stock, so you go out, get them yourself, and read this amazing manga series. Moving on real quick here, we have 2 volumes from one of the greatest manga creators of all time. You know his name, you know at least one of his series. That is Akira Toriyama. This summer, I read Jaco the Galactic Patrolman and, of course, Sandland. Now, we'll start off with Sandland here. If you guys don't remember, a couple months ago, I got this out-of-print manga volume that is usually pretty expensive for a great price below market value. Then a couple weeks later, it got reprinted. I guess with all of the amazing deals on manga I've gotten over the years, it's probably karma that I get burned once or twice here and there. But honestly, even though I overpaid a little bit, I still loved this manga. Basically follows this demon who teams up with a human to expose this corrupt government in this wacky desert environment. I would even go as far as to say it's a land full of sand. But it's just a really fun one, and honestly, one of Toriyama's strengths as a manga is just making these awesome adventure series with pure-hearted characters, obviously like Goku. He's just a master at making these somewhat simple, but so enjoyable and heartwarming, fun stories, and I really enjoyed Sandland. Very similar to Dragon Ball in tone, so if you're a fan of the series, pick up Sandland for sure. And then the other book I read from him is, of course, Jaco the Galactic Patrolman. Love this volume. Found this at my used store for like $5, and this one has not been reprinted yet, so I can't really say just go out and get this volume because it's a little bit more expensive. But again, this was a really fun one that I really enjoyed. Out of the 2 books, I would probably say I enjoyed Sandland a little bit more, but both of these are so fun, and if you're a fan of Dragon Ball, I would highly recommend trying to get your hands on both of these volumes. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this year I've been trying to get through all of my manga collection, read every single volume, and a big chunk of my TBR at the moment is Osamu Tezuka manga. Now granted, Osamu Tezuka is one of, if not my favorite mangaka of all time, so I love what I read of his stuff, but I have a lot of it to still get through, so I set out to read at least one Tezuka manga per week just to pace myself in getting through it all. And this past week I read two Osamu Tezuka manga, the first being The Thief Inoue Akakazu, and the second being Crime and Punishment. I won't spend too long on these, but The Thief Inoue Akakazu is a short story collection, varying qualities in the stories. Some I liked. The final one, the title of the book itself, I wasn't a massive fan of. Then we have Crime and Punishment. Now, if that title sounds a little familiar too, this is not the only book titled this. It's based off of a classic novel, I believe a Russian novel. And yeah, this one was alright. I probably enjoyed it a little bit less than Thief Inoue Akakazu, but it was still a decent read. I think Tezuka said, admittedly, this is not one of his favorite works he's produced, which I can definitely understand. But again, if you're a fan of Tezuka, I would say go ahead, give this one a try. You might really like it, but me personally, I just thought it was alright. You know, in these manga reading log videos, I usually don't have a lot of manga that I just say, yeah, it was alright, but this next manga series is one I can say with confidence is super underrated and I have been loving. This summer, I finally started a manga series that's been on my TBR for probably about a year and a half now. That is Alive: The Final Evolution. So far, I've read the first 5 volumes, and I will say, I am pleasantly surprised with how much I'm enjoying this one so far. The manga is basically about this weird phenomena that happens in Japan and around the world, where one day something just happens, something falls from the sky, and people just start killing themselves all over the place. Now, our main protagonist here is affected by the same phenomena, but he becomes what is called a comrade, which is a rare person who is unaffected and actually gains powers from this whole debacle. So the main character groups up with some good comrades to fight some other comrades who seek basically the annihilation of humanity and the further evolution of life on the planet. Some of the powers I've seen so far are just so cool. Like there's this fat bastard who has this one where if you break a promise with him, this angel that he has over his shoulder will just kill you instantly. And the cast of characters so far I've really been liking. I've become attached to a lot of them, and I'm really curious to see where the story goes on from here because I hear it just gets better and better. Now, unfortunately, this manga's English printing was cut short, I'm assuming due to lack of sales. I have the first 5 and volume 8 out of the total 8 volumes put out in English. But honestly, if this series continues the way it's going, I can see myself reading the entire series, I believe all 20 or 24 volumes, on the scans because it is just that good. Now moving on to the main manga series that has taken up most of my reading time this summer, we have a series that I actually mentioned in my most recent video about unfinished manga series. That series, of course, being X 1999 or X by Clamp. This summer I read volumes 1 through 15 here. I'm just waiting on 16 to arrive, and then I can read the final 3 volumes that are put out in English. So for the uninitiated, basically X 1999 is about this high schooler named Kamui who has the fate of the entire world in his hands. He can either choose to be one of the 7 dragons of heaven to save the earth, or join the 7 dragons of earth, ironically, to destroy it. Now, obviously, being a Clamp series, there are a lot of people who love this manga, despite it being unfinished, and I will say, the first couple volumes of the series were some of the most creative, abstract, surrealist manga volumes I have ever read. But I'm not gonna lie, I don't think this manga is quite as good as everybody else will say. Sure, I'm probably not the target demographic for this shoujo manga, but it's still very dark and gruesome at times. But the main reason that this series just doesn't always click with me is the writing. I don't think is quite up to par with some of the better manga series I've read. Basically spends a lot of time rehashing the same ideas, saying Kamui controls the destiny of the world. They say this like 20 times every single volume. I also forget the name of it, but there's a famous paradox that basically says within a story, the larger the stakes, the less invested the audience is likely to be. And obviously when you have the fate of the world as your stakes, therein lies the problem. It just kind of is a lot harder to care about such grand scale things. For me personally, I'm sure a lot of you guys can also relate, is when the conflict is more personal, I feel it has more weight, you can relate to it more, whereas the fate of the destruction of the world, not quite as relatable or interesting. I also don't think the action is drawn all that well. These characters all have these different powers, but when the action is drawn, it can just be really muddled and hard to tell exactly what is going on. And again, the stakes don't really feel that high for the action in the first place. I'm still enjoying this series. Obviously, I've read through 15 volumes, and I plan to read all 18 that were put out. Not my favorite shoujo manga that I've read, but if you like shoujo or looking to get into some shoujo manga that you haven't read before, I would definitely recommend X1999 to try it out for yourself. And last, but definitely not least, we have the manga series that I've gotten back into after several months of not reading it, and it has now become one of my very few 10 out of 10 masterpiece manga. And of course, the series in question is none other than Kaoru Mori's A Bride's Story. Now, just to fill you guys in, I've been reading Bride's Story for probably about 1 to 2 years, here and there as the volumes come out, and I've absolutely loved every single one. But after several months of not touching this series and just letting the volumes stack up, I decided it was time to get back into it, and it has solidified my opinion that this is a masterpiece manga series. Now, I always forget exactly which country this manga takes place in. I'll put it up on the screen. But it basically follows this young boy who is given a bride who, of course, is a little bit older than him, as is customary for the time period and the place. But it basically just follows this cast of characters in this nomadic community of people as they just do their daily activities. These characters learn how to do embroidery, they get married, they hunt for food, they do all sorts of stuff that admittedly sounds a little bit mundane on paper, but there's also so much action thrown into this series that when I was first reading it, it really took me by surprise. Without a doubt, hands down, the best part of this manga is the cast of characters. I have come to love every single one of them. They have different personalities, they're super distinct from one another, but just as a part of this whole community, their lives just mesh together so well. And similar to series like Aria, this is one that just brings a smile to my face every time I pick up a volume. And when it comes to the manga artwork, this series is second to none. Honestly, top 10 greatest drawn manga of all time. The way Mori is able to draw textures and these complicated patterns on textiles, as well as animals, landscapes, everything you can imagine is amazing. So for a manga to be a 10 out of 10 for me personally, one, it has to obviously be technically sound, and Bride's Story is definitely that, but it also has to invoke a strong feeling within me of whatever kind. You have series like number 5, which is, very emotional and sad, or a series like Gantz, which was just a blast and so much fun. And the feeling that I get from Bride's Story is just pure bliss and joy. There's really no other way to describe it. You gotta read this. If you're sleeping on Bride's Story, wake the hell up and pick up some of these volumes. I guarantee you will love it. So anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this summer manga reading log. I hope you guys enjoyed kind of catching up with me, seeing what I've been reading this summer. Make sure to go down in the comments below and comment what manga you have been reading this summer, whether it be your favorite or just some stuff you've been reading recently. Definitely let me know. And of course, if you enjoy this style of video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more manga videos just like this. So yeah, this has been ThePromG. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. And as always, hope to catch you in the next one.